Welcome to Life Stories, where real moments turn into powerful lessons. Today, we bring you the story of Olivia, a devoted single mother who believed she had found love again. But as her relationship with Ryan deepened, her daughter Emily's quiet warnings hinted at something far more dangerous beneath his charm. How do you recognize the difference between love and control? And what happens when a mother is forced to choose between her future and her child's safety? Stay with us as we uncover a story of resilience, love, and the courage to walk away. Subscribe now to begin today's story. There was a time when I believed in love. The kind of love that filled your heart so completely that there was no room for doubt. No space for uncertainty. I had that once. Or at least, I thought I did. And then, life had a way of proving me wrong. I was 35, a mother first and foremost. A career woman second. Romance? That had long since faded from my list of priorities. My world revolved around Emily, my 10-year-old daughter. The most precious part of my life. Everything I did, every decision, every sacrifice, was for her. Emily was different from other kids. She had always been quieter, more observant. While other children ran wild in the playground, Emily preferred the company of her books and sketchpad. She could sit for hours, lost in a world of her own creation, her small fingers tracing delicate lines onto the pages, bringing stories to life that only she could see. Our two-bedroom apartment in Chicago was not grand, but it was ours. It was filled with warmth, the smell of vanilla from our weekend baking sessions, and the soft hum of a life we had built together. The living room, though cluttered with Emily's art supplies and stacks of books, felt like a haven, a place where we could shut out the noise of the world and just be. I had been a single mother for nearly 8 years. My divorce from Jason had left scars. Some visible, others hidden beneath layers of resilience. He was the man who once promised me forever, only to leave when reality didn't match his expectations. The day he walked out, I made myself a promise. I would never let anyone hurt Emily the way he had hurt me. Rachel, my best friend, had spent years trying to convince me to put myself out there again. You deserve something for yourself. Liv, she would say, stirring her coffee with exaggerated patience whenever the subject came up. You can't just be a mother and a marketing executive forever. You're a person too. But love wasn't on the menu for me. At least, that's what I told myself. Then came the night of the charity gala. I had no intention of attending. It was one of those corporate events where everyone was expected to network, sip expensive wine, and pretend they were deeply invested in modern art. But my boss insisted. So there I was, standing in a navy blue dress that felt too formal, a glass of champagne in hand, staring at an abstract painting that made no sense. That's when I heard the voice beside me. Modern art, a celebration of confusion, the man said, his tone laced with amusement. I turned, slightly intrigued. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his sandy blonde hair neatly styled, his blue eyes sharp yet inviting. You don't sound like a fan, I replied, the smallest of smiles tugging at my lips. He shrugged. Oh, I appreciate the effort, but I've always been more drawn to things that tell a story. Something with heart, not just brushstrokes. That was how I met Ryan Mitchell. The conversation unfolded effortlessly. He introduced himself as an entrepreneur, someone with a passion for philanthropy and business. Unlike most men I had met, he seemed genuinely interested in listening. When I mentioned Emily, I braced myself for the usual shift, the flicker of hesitation, the polite but detached acknowledgement. But there was none of that. Instead, he asked, "What's she like?" And before I realized what I was doing, I painted a picture of Emily for him. Her love for reading, her clever observations, the quiet way she took in the world. Ryan smiled warmly. She sounds incredible. You must be proud. I am, I said, and for the first time in a long while, my heart felt unexpectedly light. By the end of the evening, he asked if he could see me again, and against every instinct I had built to protect myself, I said yes. Our first date was at a small Italian bistro, the kind of place that smelled like fresh pasta and warm bread, with candlelight flickering against the walls. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen as more than just a mother, more than just a career woman. Ryan was charming but never overbearing. Confident but not arrogant. He asked about my goals, my dreams, and, most surprisingly, about Emily. She's a huge part of my life. I told him, my voice steady but cautious. As she should be. He replied without hesitation. I'd love to meet her, when you feel it's right. My chest tightened at those words. I had introduced Emily to someone once before, and the outcome had been disappointing. But there was something about Ryan's sincerity that made me believe he meant it. Weeks passed, and he remained consistent, thoughtful, steady. He brought small gifts for Emily, a book from her reading list, a set of colored pencils. He joined us for weekend brunches, helped her with a school project. Yet, no matter how much he tried, Emily remained reserved. She's shy, I told him one evening as we walked to our cars. Ryan smiled. She's smart, he corrected. She's watching, listening. I'd be the same way if someone new came into my mom's life. His words settled inside me, warm and reassuring. Few men understood the bond between a mother and her child. But he did, or at least, he seemed to. Looking back now, I wonder how I didn't see it then. The way Emily hesitated when he entered a room. The way she clutched her sketch pad a little tighter when he spoke. But love, hope, has a way of making you blind to the things you don't want to see. It was a breezy Saturday afternoon when Emily met Ryan for the first time. I had spent the morning reassuring myself that this was the right decision. That she deserved the chance to know the man who was slowly becoming a part of my life. We met at a park just outside the city. The kind of place where laughter floated in the air. Where children ran across the grass with wild abandon. And the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe lingered in the breeze. Emily, her sketchpad tucked under her arm, walked beside me, her steps quiet, measured. Ryan greeted her with the same effortless warmth that had drawn me in. Hey, Emily, he said, offering her a small package wrapped neatly in brown paper. I heard you like to read. Emily hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing the edges of the paper. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a book she had mentioned once in passing. A story she had been eager to read. Thank you, she said softly, her voice polite but distant. She didn't smile, but she didn't shrink away either. That was a good sign, I told myself. The afternoon passed in careful increments. Ryan asked about her favorite subjects. Listened attentively as she talked about her love for art and stories. He never pushed, never overwhelmed her with questions. By the time we left, Emily hadn't warmed to him. But she hadn't rejected him either. That was enough for me. Over the next few months, Ryan became a steady presence in our lives. He joined us for brunches, helped Emily with her school projects, and never forgot to bring her small, thoughtful gifts. He was patient, understanding, the kind of man I had convinced myself didn't exist anymore. But Emily remained reserved. She never ran to him with excitement. Never sought his attention the way she did with Rachel or her teachers. If anything, she seemed more cautious than before. Her interactions careful, calculated. One night, as I tucked her into bed, I smoothed her hair back and asked, "Sweetheart, do you like spending time with Ryan?" She hesitated, her small fingers twisting the corner of her blanket. "He's okay." I waited, sensing more behind her pause. "It's all right to tell me how you feel." Her lips pressed together, and then, after a long silence, she said, "He's nice, but sometimes, when he looks at me, his smile stops at his eyes." Something in her words sent a shiver down my spine. A warning, quiet but firm. I should have listened. Instead, I convinced myself that she was just being cautious. That time would ease the distance between them. After all, Ryan had never given me a reason to doubt him. He was kind, attentive, and willing to embrace not just me, but my daughter too. What more could I ask for? I didn't know then that the answer to that question would come at a price. A few weeks later, Ryan invited us to spend the weekend at his lake house in upstate New York. He described it as peaceful. A perfect getaway from the rush of city life. I was hesitant at first. Emily had never spent the night away from home unless it was with Rachel, but Ryan reassured me, promising that everything would be comfortable for her. She'll have her own room, her own space. He said, "I want her to feel at home with us." It was the way he said it, with us, that made my heart swell. He saw a future with us. He wanted us to be a family. The drive to the lake house was smooth. Emily sat in the back seat, her sketchpad resting on her lap, drawing quietly as Ryan and I chatted. She answered when spoken to, but her responses were brief. I told myself she just needed time to adjust. The lake house was beautiful, 2 stories of glass and cedar wood overlooking the water, with a porch that stretched across the entire front. It looked like something out of a magazine, pristine, almost too perfect. Inside, everything was arranged with precision. The furniture was sleek, modern, symmetrical. The surfaces were spotless, untouched. There were no photos on the walls, no personal items that gave the house warmth. Emily took it all in with her usual quiet observation, her fingers tracing the edge of the staircase railing as we walked through. Ryan had set up a guest room just for her, complete with a new set of colored pencils and a fresh sketch pad. "I hope you like it," he said, his smile easy. Emily gave a small nod. "Thank you," but her voice was distant, polite, not warm. That evening, as we prepared dinner together, laughter filled the kitchen. It felt good, normal. Emily sat at the counter, sketching while we cooked, but then, she knocked over her glass, sending water spilling across the counter. She immediately reached for a napkin, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Ryan's voice cut through the air, sharper than before. "Careful, Emily." His tone wasn't loud, but it carried something cold, a quiet warning. Emily's hands faltered for a second before she quickly wiped up the spill. I forced a smile. "It's just water, Ryan. No harm done." Ryan's lips curved slightly as he met my eyes. "Of course. Just teaching a little mindfulness." He reached over and ruffled Emily's curls lightly. She tensed beneath his touch. That night, Emily appeared at my bedroom door, her sketchpad hugged to her chest. "Mom," she whispered, "can I sleep here with you?" She hadn't asked that in years. I frowned, concerned. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" She hesitated, then mumbled, "The room's too big. It feels strange." Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. "Of course, baby," I said, lifting the covers, as she curled into my side. Small and warm, I brushed my fingers through her hair. I told myself it was just the unfamiliarity of the house. Just an adjustment, but deep down, something felt off. I just didn't know what yet. The following weeks passed in a blur of routines and small moments that should have felt normal, but didn't. Ryan's presence in our lives grew stronger. He began showing up more often, picking me up from work, joining us for weekend outings. On the surface, it was everything I had once wished for: stability, companionship, a future. But Emily was pulling away. At first, it was subtle. She would disappear into her room whenever Ryan came over, spending more time with her sketchpad and books than usual. She spoke less at dinner when he was there, her answers clipped and neutral. When he asked her a question, she responded politely but never elaborated. I noticed it, but I told myself it was just her nature. She had always been quiet around new people. One evening, Ryan offered to pick Emily up from school because I had a late meeting. It seemed like a simple gesture, something a caring partner would do. When I called Emily afterward to check in, her voice was even, emotionless. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. A pause. Ryan picked me up. It was fine. Something about the way she said fine made my stomach clench. Later that night, as I tucked her in, I smoothed her hair back and tried again. "Do you like spending time with Ryan?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her blanket. "He's okay," she said, just as she had before. But this time, I could hear something beneath the words. A quiet distance. I waited, sensing she wanted to say more. But instead, she whispered, "Good night, Mom," and rolled onto her side. Away from me, I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the unease creeping into my thoughts. Ryan had done nothing wrong. He had been nothing but kind, attentive, patient, hadn't he? But Emily's journal told a different story. One evening, as I tidied up her room, I noticed her pink notebook lying open on her desk. I would never normally read her journal, but my eyes caught a single sentence. Written in her neat, slanted handwriting. He's nice to Mom, but when he looks at me, his smile stops at his eyes. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I reread the words. She had said those exact same words to me once before. I had brushed them off. Now, they stared back at me. Undeniable. I closed the journal carefully, my fingers trembling. That night, I held Emily a little longer when I hugged her goodnight. She didn't say anything, but I felt it, the quiet relief in her small body pressed against mine. Something was wrong, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I could keep telling myself otherwise. The tension between Ryan and Emily became harder to ignore. It was in the small things, the way she tensed whenever he placed a hand on her shoulder. The way she shrank back when he entered the room. It was in how she never laughed around him. Never relaxed the way she did with Rachel or her teachers. But I kept pushing those thoughts away. He's trying, I told myself. He wants to be a part of our lives. And it was true. Ryan was always present. Always making an effort. He brought Emily thoughtful gifts. Joined us for meals. And made a point to ask about her schoolwork. But no matter what he did, the distance between them never closed. One evening, we went to dinner at Ryan's condo. It was an elegant place. Meticulously arranged. Just like his lake house. Emily sat across from Ryan at the dining table. Her small hands resting in her lap. She was quiet, eating slowly, her eyes flicking up only when spoken to. Then, she dropped her fork. It clattered against the floor. The sound unnaturally loud in the silence of the room. Ryan, in the middle of telling a story, stopped mid-sentence. His face didn't change, but something in his posture did. Pick it up, he said. Emily slid off her chair to retrieve it. But as she reached, the fork slipped from her fingers again, clinking against the tiles. A sharp breath. Ryan's voice came again, low and precise. I said pick it up. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried something cold. Something that made my stomach tighten. Ryan, I said gently, forcing a smile. It's just a fork. Ryan's lips pressed into a thin smile. And he leaned back in his chair. I'm just teaching her responsibility. He said smoothly. Children should learn to handle small tasks without clumsiness. Emily kept her gaze on the floor. She didn't say a word. That night, after we got home, I sat on the edge of Emily's bed, brushing her hair back as she stared at the ceiling. Sweetheart, I said softly, do you like spending time with Ryan? She hesitated again, but this time, she didn't answer right away. Her fingers twisted in the corner of her blanket. He's nice, she said finally, but sometimes, he looks at me like I'm in his way. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I opened my mouth to reassure her, to tell her she was imagining it. But something stopped me. Instead, I cupped her cheek and whispered, Baby, you are never in anyone's way. And if you ever feel uncomfortable, you tell me, promise? Emily nodded, but the shadow in her eyes lingered. And that night, as I lay awake in bed, I finally let myself admit it. Something wasn't right. The wedding never happened. I wish I could say there was a single defining moment when everything became clear. But in truth, it was a series of moments, piling up like whispers in the dark, until they became too loud to ignore. The final straw came at the rehearsal dinner. Emily had tripped over the hem of her dress, nearly knocking over a chair. It was nothing, a small stumble. But Ryan's hand clamped onto her arm. His grip firm, his voice low but sharp. Be more careful. It was the look in Emily's eyes that shattered everything. Fear, not hesitation, not discomfort, fear. I saw it then, all at once. The weight of every moment I had overlooked. The tension in her small shoulders. The way she had been pulling away. The words she had written in her journal. I feel like he only likes me when I'm invisible. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, I took off the engagement ring, packed our bags, and walked away. Ryan didn't take it well. He called. He showed up. He tried to twist my doubts against me. But I had already made my choice. With Rachel's help and a lawyer's guidance, I filed a restraining order. And for the first time in a long time, I breathed. Emily and I rebuilt our life. Just the two of us. There were quiet nights, laughter-filled mornings, and a sense of peace that had been missing for too long. Love isn't supposed to come with fear. And if you ever find yourself questioning whether something feels right, listen. Because your instincts? They're trying to protect you. Subscribe to Life Stories for more powerful and unforgettable stories.